There was duct tape on the wrist and across the mouth.
Bruises that would basically mimic fingers.
A heinous attack.
They suffocated her till she expired.
A murder with a multitude of suspects.
They've been neighbors for a while, but was there something that happened between them that nobody was really aware of?
Or was this a gang initiation robbery murder?
It was a 4-carat diamond worth about $30,000.
The truth will be revealed.
Once you find out there's a love triangle, now you're going to look at the other woman.
If you know details about the crime scene, that means you participated in the crime or you found out about it.
So it threw a red flag up to us that we had to watch this guy.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Cordova, Tennessee, a wealthy suburb of Memphis, tucked into the southwest corner of the state.
It's upper middle class. People there are professionals. You know, the houses were big, located on a very nice golf course.
The church is a big part of the community. A lot of our friends have strong Christian beliefs.
And with that privileged life comes security.
In that part of town, you have the car burglaries, the house burglaries, the thefts and stuff like that. Not a lot of violent crime.
But on a warm fall evening in this sleepy southern town, the community's faith would be tested.
Shortly after midnight, on October 26th, Joe Corona came into the police department in order to report his wife missing.
Mr. Corona advised us that his wife had left around 10:50 in the morning that Saturday, and she was driving a black truck. And he hadn't heard from her in like 12 hours.
Detectives immediately put out an all-points bulletin on the black truck.
On October 27th, at about 8:05 in the morning, I was notified of the truck being found in Bartlett, Tennessee. And I'm thinking, the person that they think's endangered, missing for almost 2 days, and now her vehicle's found parked on the street. This is not good.
Law enforcement find the truck on a dead-end street in a rough part of town.
As I walk up and I look, not touching anything, but using my hands to look into there, I'm like, that's a body.
We could see the ankles and the legs between the front and back seat. The body had been covered with a towel. The truck was in perfect condition and parked right underneath a no parking sign.
And I'm like, why would somebody park under a no parking sign? That started making us think the killer had remorse for the person being dead. It was parked there so they won't sit in a vehicle for weeks, months. They want the person to be found.
The victim is positively identified as 44-year-old Tina Corona.
I remember Tina because she had such a big, beautiful smile and a big personality. A room lit up when she walked into it.
She just would take charge of anything you were working on together, and you just like, man, I want to be on the Tina train. This gal's got it going on. She's a very capable woman and just so much fun.
Tasked with solving the brutal homicide of Tina Corona are detectives Kevin Martin and John Owen.
The strange thing about the body was that her hands were duct taped together. But it was like they put a piece of duct tape around and just touched it. That didn't appear as though someone was trying to actually restrain her.
And there was duct tape across the mouth, but it wasn't covering the mouth.
Her shoes were set and the driver's floorboard up beside the seat just sat down real nice and neat. So that didn't really make a lot of sense. It was done as if it were staged.
I noticed that the glove box had been rummaged through, but not the armrest. And it was just odd because in other auto burglaries and robberies that I'd worked, if they were going to rummage through one thing, they were rummage through everything.
She still had on her wedding band. It was a 4-carat diamond worth about $30,000. I'm not trying to be mean, but if I'm robbing somebody, I'm going to take that ring.
Detectives suspect they are dealing with a homicide, staged to look like a burglary gone wrong.
We noticed that we had 3 long bruises on the left forearm. Bruises that would basically mimic fingers. They almost looked like 3 fingers of a hand. And then we saw some bruising on her right upper hip and her right inner thigh. Looking at how the body was positioned in the vehicle, looking at the shoes, it would appear as though she had had a struggle with someone, but we didn't believe that the struggle happened inside the vehicle.
Investigators determine the cause of death.
The medical examiner said it was asphyxiation and wasn't a strangulation. If someone was strangled, there would be marks on the neck or damage to the neck if it was strong enough, and fingerprints and DNA and everything else. Asphyxiation means that the air was cut off, which could have been caused by a garbage bag over the head.
To find the killer, detectives will need to unravel the final 24 hours of Tina Corona's life.
So the only information we had for our timeline was when she was leaving her house at 10:50 on Saturday. And then the ending point where we found the vehicle on Monday at approximately 8 o'clock in the morning.
Detectives canvass the neighborhood where Tina's car was found.
We get information from one of the neighbors who says that she noticed that the vehicle was there about 12:50 on Saturday when she was getting ready to go to work. Now we're down to 10:50 to 12:50, so there's a 2-hour window. Somewhere in between there is when the murder occurred.
Detectives break the news to Joe that his wife has been murdered.
He responded in a breaking down, crying, extremely emotional way.
Everybody loved Joe. He was, the Italian stallion, so to speak.
Joe was selling shoes, and somehow Cupid's arrow struck Tina, and she fell for Joe. I know Tina looked up to Joe, and I know from hearing it firsthand many times how much Joe said he loved Tina. They were just a fabulous couple.
Joe tells detectives they had a great life together.
Tina was very successful. She worked for a financial advising firm and had been working her way up and was doing very, very well financially.
Through some connections, she was able to get Joe into selling annuity products.
She made 6 figures. She took care of him.
They went down to casinos and did vacations and cruises. They were checking off a lot of things on their bucket list all the time.
Tina and Joe were members of the Memphis Corvette Club. They had some classic cars that they had invested in. There were 8 cars that were owned by the Coronas. 4 of them stayed in storage and 4 were at the house.
Detectives asked Joe to account for Tina's movements on the day she disappeared.
Joe tells us that they get up about 8 o'clock in the morning and they start doing chores.
About 10:15, she had a phone call with Matt Struna.
We were planning on having this progressive dinner with the entire Corvette Club. You would stop at one house for maybe an appetizer, and then you would drive to another house and have a main course.
Tina had been elected to the presidency of that club, which meant that she was in charge of planning the dinners.
I thought, well, I'll go and help Tina if she needs it. So I called. She did not say she needed any help. Tina is a take charge. I can handle it. Don't worry about it. I've got this.
And according to Joe, about 10:50, Tina had left the house in a truck to go shopping for the Progressive dinner.
So Joe tells us he makes a phone call 11:30 that he's going to go to his friend's house, Mr. Hathaway, and they're going to work on his vehicle. So Joe drives the vehicle over, and he stays there working on his vehicle until Mrs. Hathaway comes out and says, Joe, you need to get ready for the party. It's coming up pretty quick. So he went home, and he attempts to contact Tina and gets no answer. Then he attempts to call her again at 4:12 and no answer. He calls again at 4:44 and there's still no answer. So he ends up calling someone from the Corvette Club at 4:45 and says, have you heard from Tina in regards to the party? And no one has.
The Corvette Club at that point organizing search parties to go out looking for Tina.
We did divide up the entire Corvette Club into several large groups, probably within a 20-mile radius. My level of worry was pretty high. Maybe she was carjacked or kidnapped because Tina wasn't one to drive off and leave family or husband or friends. You knew something was terribly wrong.
It was about 12 hours later, after midnight on the 26th, that Joe Corona showed up at the police station reporting her missing.
To take 12 hours to report someone missing, especially someone you care about, that you're in a longer-term relationship with, I think is very suspicious.
Being the husband, naturally, in most every case, that's your first suspect.
Why do so many husbands kill their wives? It comes down to often control, entitlement, and greed. And there's really no other way to slice it.
With suspicion swirling around Joe Corona, detectives check his alibi with friend and neighbor, Gary Hathaway.
He did say that Joe had showed up and that they stayed there and they worked on the car the whole time. So Gary was basically with him during that time frame.
After ruling Joe out as a suspect, they ask him who might want Tina dead.
Who would not like her? Who would have something in for her? No one. She was a nice person. She didn't have any enemies.
They then get an alarming call from officers combing the area where Tina's truck was found.
They saw this man out in the middle of the field, which is a strange place for somebody just to be, and so they went up to him.
Detective Owen and I left and went to that location. And when we got there, patrol had detained a gentleman by the name of Jeff Cox. He was armed at the time. This is not right. Something's weird.
A lot of times when you have suspects, they will want to return to the scene to see what's going on. So it threw a red flag up to us that we had to watch this guy.
He was a neighbor of Tina Corona, and he was friends with her, and he was extremely upset with what happened.
He tells detectives that he is familiar with the area where Tina's truck was parked.
One of those streets was a big drug haven where people would come and purchase drugs. And he thought, since he knew the area, that somebody from that drug location might have had something to do with Tina's death, and he was gonna find the clues to help solve the killing of his friend, Tina.
There are many reasons why a killer might lurk around the crime scene after they've killed. Sometimes it's from a place of anxiety. They want to see, have police been called? What is happening? Do people know?
If they have psychological problems, it's a high for them to go back and look at their work. Or sometimes they take trophies. We didn't know if that was what was going on with Mr. Cox.
Detectives consider possible motives.
They've been neighbors for a while, but was there something that happened between them that nobody was really aware of? Was there an interaction, an argument, a fight that might have led Jeff Cox to want to kill Tina Corona?
Sometimes when people are interviewed in the field or at the scene and behaving in suspicious ways can be very valuable. People may respond differently when they're informed that this is a serious situation and there's costs here. I think as part of any investigation, this is always a good strategy to help rule in and rule out suspects, especially ones who are behaving oddly or in an atypical manner.
Detectives asked Jeff where he was during the critical time they believe Tina was killed.
During the time frame that Tina was killed, he was with his wife the whole time.
He didn't have anything to do with it.
We determined that maybe this guy was trying to be a good Samaritan and be a good neighbor, and he just took it overboard.
As strange as it sounds, many of these cases bring these characters out of the woodwork, and they insert themselves early on, and they can prove to be very frustrating distractions that do little else other than muddy the waters, and we see it in this case.
Looking for their next lead, detectives comb over Tina Corona's phone records. They notice something strange.
As the Corvette Club was trying to help find what happened with Tina, Joe Corona was told by someone by the name of Joe Underwood that he had spoken with Tina that morning.
Joe Underwood is a member of the same Corvette Club the Coronas belong to. Joe claims he called Tina to ask her what food she was going to bring to the party that evening.
So as we're looking through the records, and it shows incoming, outgoing calls, drop calls, everything else, we're not able to find any record on either phone, Tina's personal phone or her business phone, where Mr. Underwood has contacted her.
Suspicious as to why Joe Underwood would lie about talking to Tina on the morning she disappeared, detectives bring him down to the station for questioning.
So Mr. Underwood's telling us that he spoke to Tina between 10 and 12. Well, we know Tina left at 10:50, and we also know that the vehicle was parked there at 12:50. So he's claiming to talking to her in this 2-hour time frame, which could have been the time when she was murdered. We present him with this evidence, and he is still determined to say that he spoke to her during that time frame. Why would someone do that?
Detectives begin to theorize why Joe Underwood would want Tina dead.
Was this a power play over her role with the Corvette Club? Was there something more illicit going on? Was he infatuated with her and had been rejected by her?
So we start asking more questions about Mr. Underwood with the individuals at the Corvette Club. They end up telling us that he's kind of on the outside of the inner core of the Corvette Club, and that he wants to present himself in a better light.
Detectives decide to take a different approach and ask Joe his theory on who killed Tina.
And it's here where the ball is put in the suspect's court to offer an explanation that in many cases will reveal that they know more than they're letting on, or will reveal a motive that hadn't previously been considered. Often the suspects themselves are the best sources of information. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, but it's still in the book because it works.
Underwood tells detectives he believes that the motive for killing Tina wasn't a robbery because she was still wearing her diamond rings.
We're like, wait a minute, how do you know anything about rings?
How does he know it other than the fact that he was there?
If you know details about a crime scene and you weren't privy to that information, did you participate in the crime?
Begs the question, is he the killer?
Detectives are working a theory that Tina could have been killed by Joe Underwood, a friend and fellow member of the Corvette Club.
So as we're speaking with him, he says, if the rings are there, is one crime, and if the rings are missing, it would be a robbery. And we're like, okay, how do you know anything about rings? He knows about our crime scene.
Underwood then tries to implicate fellow Corvette Club member and previously ruled out suspect, Jeff Cox.
We start thinking, well, wait a minute, why is he trying to throw him under the bus? Why would you try to divert us from talking to you and sending us to him?
People might offer another suspect because they genuinely have an idea it could be that person. Sometimes if it's the perpetrator themselves, they may deliberately try to divert attention away from themselves and specifically onto someone else.
We asked him where he was on Saturday, the 25th, and he explained to us that he was at work from 9 to about 3:20 at his business.
We know through phone records and business records that he couldn't have had any involvement because he was 30 minutes away from the scene when it occurred, and we can put him there all morning. So we know he wasn't involved.
Detectives then learn that Underwood has a relative in the police department, which is how he knew about the crime scene.
His lying, I think, came from wanting to feel important in the case, thinking that it would make him look good in the Corvette Club. And that's not something that you want to do when you're talking about a murder case.
For whatever reason, in murder investigations, there are neurotic people who thrive on drama and conflict. And when they find themselves even on the outskirts or periphery of a murder investigation, they simply can't help but insert themselves and begin meddling. What we see is a confusing and contradictory crime scene where a lot of the behaviors don't seem to make sense.
Having ruled out yet another suspect, detectives are nowhere closer to finding Tina Corona's killer.
So the frustration level, of course, is just maxed out. And, there is pressure to solve this crime.
You have to treat it as business. You can't let your emotions get to you. You have to do it based on logic. And that's all you can do.
Detectives return to Tina Corona's inner circle, looking for clues that will hopefully lead to her killer.
So we set up an interview with Tina's brother, Scott, to come and talk with us in regards to Tina and Joe. Scott was not a fan of Joe Corona.
He indicated that the marriage wasn't what it looked like. They put up a good front that they were happy, but truly, behind closed doors, there was something else going on.
He gives us the name of Becky Black. And he says that Joe has been having an affair with her for 10 years.
Joe's affair with Becky is the town's worst kept secret.
I had gone out with Tina about a month prior to her being murdered. Tina was a little miffed at Joe because they'd gotten in an argument. And I said, well, do you think he's still cheating with Becky? And she just looked down like this, and she said, I don't know. But I knew that she wasn't telling me the truth. And I don't think she meant to lie to me. I think she was trying to convince herself that she didn't know, but she did know.
Once you find out there's a possible love triangle and you can find out who that person is, now you're going to look at the other woman to see if that's the person who's the one who might have murdered Tina.
We often think about a jealous or jilted male eliminating his rival. There are cases where, and it stands to reason, a female will take out her rival, the other female, in order to claim the man. This boils down to simple territoriality.
Detectives shift the focus of their investigation onto the woman Joe was having an affair with, Becky Black.
We find out where she lives, and we go to see her because we want to interview her. And it just so happens the day that we go to the house is the day of the viewing of Tina Corona. She sees us and she's not sure what's going on, and I explained to her who I am and that I needed to speak with her about her relationship with Joe and Tina Corona. She basically went sideways, her knees buckled, and she hit the side of the wall to hold herself up. She almost fell. When I saw her knees buckle, I said, she knows something. She has more information that's going to help us with this investigation. That's what I knew.
Down at the station, detectives question Becky about her relationship with Joe Corona.
She said, well, we were just friends, you know, my husband and I, and we would go over and get in the hot tub together. We would do things together, but it wasn't any big deal. She never admitted to an affair.
As she denies this relationship, other than the friendship, we're thinking that she's not being totally honest with us.
If Becky's gonna lie about this and try to cover it up, then what else is she gonna cover up and lie about?
All lies boil down to one thing: fear. People will lie because they're afraid of the consequences of telling the truth.
At that point, we began to look at her as a potential suspect also. Could she have tried to get Tina out of the way so she could have Joe?
Did Joe say, I'm going to leave Tina for you? And that wasn't happening, or it was taking too long to happen. Was Becky done waiting on that? So she took things into her own hands.
Sometimes when people are part of love triangles, especially rivalrous ones, things can go wrong. Jealousy can be a very powerful motive for murder.
Detectives suspect that Tina Corona might have been murdered by her husband's jealous mistress, Becky Black.
In order to try to eliminate or include Becky as a suspect, we ask for some DNA and for fingerprints. She cooperates, but then she tells the police, I've been in that truck, so I wouldn't be surprised if you found my fingerprints.
But detectives find more than her fingerprints.
We ask, is there a reason why any of your bodily fluids would be in that vehicle? And she explained to us, yes, she and Joe had performed a sexual act in the vehicle.
She came clean with everything. She told us what was going on. She was the other lady in the story, the girlfriend. And she was married, he was married, so they're having an extramarital affair.
Having linked Becky to the crime scene, detectives ask for her whereabouts during the window of time Tina Corona was murdered.
She had said that she'd been out of town. She'd gone with her family into a bonfire in another county that was about 20, 30 miles away, and then had gone to a funeral.
Detectives investigate her alibi by talking with witnesses at the funeral and checking her phone records.
The time of the death, we estimated somewhere between 10 and 12:50 on Saturday, October 25th. Well, for Becky Black, she was out of town at that time at a funeral. It wasn't possible for her to have done it, so she was ruled out as a suspect.
Having eliminated Becky Black as a suspect, detectives refocus their investigation on her lover, Joe.
We have this love triangle, so now we're thinking, did Joe kill his wife?
Detectives ask Becky if she'd be willing to wear a wire.
And she agreed to that. So when she met with him, she started talking about what really happened with Tina.
I just gotta know that everything's gonna be okay.
You and I are connected as a soul. You and I are meant to be together.
I know, but I just keep hearing all this stuff
About what?
About Tina.
What about her?
All this time, I just kept thinking that maybe, you may have done that for me, thinking that was the only way that you could get me. At first I was scared, and then I thought if you did, that made me feel special.
I didn't do it, okay? And when I say I would do anything for you, I mean I wouldn't do something like that.
Well, how do I know a year down the road you're not going to get tired of me?
You know that I have never been mad at you. Everything that I have, I would be willing to give up just to be with you.
At that point is when her whole attitude toward him changed. That gave her a real fear of him.
While not a confession, it encourages detectives to delve further into Joe's potential motive to want Tina dead.
One of the reasons why a husband might kill his wife is because he's tired of living the double life and simply wants to start again with his mistress. It also helps if he could benefit from a life insurance policy or could be getting some money out of his wife's death.
He's been having an affair for 10 years. His wife has money, so why would he kill Tina at this point? He's got his cake and he's eating it too, so why would he have to kill her?
So then we say, let's dig deeper into the personal finances of Tina and Joe and see what's going on. What else makes people want to murder their wives?
Detectives get their answer when they speak to Carrie Brown, one of Tina's closest friends.
Tina had had dinner with Carrie about 5 days before she went missing, and Tina was expressing her concern about some missing money. Tina and Joe had been trying to get a bigger house. But every time they went to get a bigger house, something would fall through, the paperwork wasn't finished.
Tina's like, I don't see how there's any problem with our finances because everything's paid for and we got great credit and da-da-da. And it ended up that Tina started doubting why she couldn't buy this house. She started thinking maybe there's something wrong. Joe takes care of the bills and he takes care of Tina. Whatever Tina wants, he makes sure Tina has. So Tina doesn't worry about the bills. Probably Tina doesn't see the bills.
So she's looking toward Joe for some answers. And Joe Corona, being the personality that he is, that certainly was a big hit to his ego.
Working the theory Joe was deceiving Tina about their finances, detectives check into his business dealings and make a shocking discovery.
The deeper I dug, I started finding out things that just didn't make sense. What he was presenting to the customer versus what he was purchasing for the customer was a large difference. He would sell the customer a $50,000 annuity. In their mind, turned out to be a $5,000 annuity. And then he would take and change the paperwork.
Joe was pocketing the $45,000 difference, essentially stealing the retirement funds of clients. But his deceitful actions didn't end there.
Joe had actually cashed in a $26,000 annuity that was in Tina's name.
So he's got motive now.
So we need to find out if he had the opportunity to kill Tina.
Detectives now believe that Joe may have killed his wife, Tina, because she learned he was defrauding both her and his clients.
So now we've gone back in the investigation to the very beginning to track Joe's movement, to see if we can ping his cell phone from some of the towers around town to see where he was during that 2-hour period that Tina had gone missing.
Joe originally said that he drove from home straight to his friend Gary Hathaway's house, where he stayed working on his car until 4 p.m.
We know through phone records that at 12:22, Joe's phone pinged off of a tower that was en route to where his classic cars were stored. Well, we know the truck was dropped off about a quarter of a mile from there.
We have witnesses who saw that truck at 12:50 on Saturday. And we know that Joe was in that area at 12:22. That tells us that Joe was in that area on his phone at that time, giving us more proof that he had the opportunity to kill Tina. This is huge.
Detectives track down Gary Hathaway, Joe's alibi, and ask more detailed questions about Joe's whereabouts the day of the murder.
So now we have to look a little more closely at Joe's alibi and to see if he really was at the Hathaway's house from 12:50 to 4 o'clock. And clearly he was. Mr. Hathaway said that he had been there.
But Gary Hathaway reveals to police something that has been troubling him.
He said that he saw the Porsche parked in the driveway, which is one of the cars that would normally be at a storage facility. Then he saw the Chevelle parked there also. And then Joe drove up in the red Corvette. And Mr. Hathaway said, you know, normally there's only 2 of the classic cars parked at the house. There's never 3. Something didn't seem right to him about that. He couldn't understand how Joe got to the storage facility to get a 3rd car. That's not normal. And he thought it was odd.
Based on the phone records and Gary Hathaway's concerns, detectives start to work a new theory.
Did Joe drop the truck off with Tina's body in there, cut through the field, pick up his Corvette at the storage unit, and go home?
As detectives dismantle Joe's alibi, the neighbor Jeff Cox comes forth with some new and startling information.
The Coxes had a camera on their house, and it pointed directly, by chance, toward the Corona home. And so this video showed Joe in the truck about 11 o'clock, pulling it into the garage. Jeff Cox said that Joe had come over, and he had shown Joe the video and said, here you are pulling in the truck at the time that Tina went missing. And Joe's like, well, I was just pulling it in so I could load the tables and the ice chests for the progressive dinner for the Corvette Club that night. Joe tells Jeff, don't worry about it. You don't need to keep the video. You can delete it because the police think it's a gang-involved murder.
So they didn't bother to keep it.
Jeff Cox believed his friend at the time, but as the investigation dragged on and it was clear the murder wasn't gang-related, he realized he had valuable information on his hands.
We have probable cause to believe that Joe Corona indeed is the one who murdered Tina. However, he has now left the jurisdiction.
Detectives issue an all-points bulletin and track Joe down at a hotel in Jackson, Tennessee.
So they go to the hotel, they find out which room he's in, and they try to talk him out. And he says, I'm not coming out. He says, I have a gun.
And then we hear click, and then click, click, click. And what he was doing, he's cocking the gun, then decocking it. Cocking it, then decocking it. So we're like, okay, good, we're fixing to get in a shootout.
It becomes very intense. You have a lot of law enforcement there with a lot of firepower.
It's not going to be a good scene.
So law enforcement just swarms in.
We get in the room, he's got a pistol with him, and we explain to him that we've got a warrant for your arrest, so you're going with us.
Detectives are now able to piece together Tina Corona's final 24 hours.
Joe and Tina wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, the 25th. As Tina is getting ready that morning, she received a phone call from Matt Struna, one of the members of the Corvette Club, in regards to helping her with anything she needs at about 10:50 in the morning. My opinion is that Tina was leaving that day. We think maybe she got some mail and opened the mail and found some information regarding some of the financial problems. And maybe she threatened Joe with all the things that he's done, his extramarital affairs, cheating people out of the money. Maybe she said, "I'm going to the authorities." So at that point, Joe panicked.
We think what he did was he grabbed her by the arm, put the bag over her head, then pushed her down on the floor and held her down on the floor with the bag over her head, suffocated her till she expired.
And then Joe had backed the truck in and placed her body in the vehicle.
Before he left, he called Gary Hathaway so that he could get an alibi established.
And then he drove it to the location where the vehicle was found in Bartlett, which was in close proximity to the storage facility that he had classic cars in, and was able to walk there very easily, and got into another vehicle after dropping off the truck, was able to drive back home after that.
I almost see Joe as a red-collar psychopath. Somebody who's engaging in what we would say white-collar crime or fraudulent activities to gain money. They're not violent thugs, but they still have a latent antisocial thinking that allows them to steal money from people. And then the collar turns from white to red when they commit violence in order to basically protect or preserve their own reputation.
Joe Corona is found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
When someone turns out to be representing nothing but pure evil, you cease to care about that person. He didn't like anybody touching him. He liked fancy clothes. He liked fancy food. He was very fussy. So I almost get a chuckle thinking what he's going through every morning he wakes up right now.
We felt that we were able to speak for Tina and that we were able to give her justice. That was the bottom line, is that we wanted Tina to have justice.
So it's kind of a bittersweet ending because we got the guy. He's gonna do life in prison, but that will never bring Tina Corona back to her family.
I remember Tina like the sunshine. She was just really friendly and made you feel good. You were like the only person in the world that mattered to her when she was talking to you. She was just special, like nobody else.